Hey guys, this is going to be a follow-up video to a video I've already done. First video was the first 3 firearms that I recommend you buying if you're thinking about starting a firearms collection. This is going to be like it's a bigger brother video that is like after you've already bought those guns, what are some firearms you can start thinking about getting to round out your collection even further? So you've got your first 3, your pistol, your rifle, your shotgun, and now you just kind of want to round out that collection so you can do more at the range, have more fun, have a variety of stuff out there. So we're going to jump off with rifles first. And the first thing that I recommend is a Ruger 1022. Now, as I'm giving you this list, this isn't like, oh, you have your first 3 guns, now go buy a Ruger 1022. What I'm suggesting here is a whole list of rifles, a whole list of pistols, and a whole list of shotguns. And then you pick from there where you think you want to direct your collection, because this is you, this is your own personalized thing. So just know I'm starting with a Ruger 1022. I'm not saying go out and buy a Ruger 1022. That having been said, there's some advantages to it. The Ruger 1022 is a really simple manual of arms. It's really easy to get used to shooting. It shoots 22 long rifle, so you can shoot it all day for about 9 cents a round. You won't put a dent in your wallet. It costs about $200 to $400 ish, depending on where you buy it and what variations it comes with. Ruger makes a ton of models of these things, but $200 will get you the basic model. Okay, so let's jump down to the next one. Ruger American. So this could really be any bolt action rifle. I tend to think that with the first 3 guns that I recommended, you've got your pistol, your rifle, and your shotgun. And the rifle I recommended was an AR-15. And the AR-15 is not really a long-range rifle. It can shoot out to some pretty decent ranges, but the goal would be here, we're trying to round out our collection, so maybe we pick a different caliber that can shoot a little further, and maybe we think about a longer barrel so we can hit out to further range. I think the Ruger American fits a lot of these things that we're thinking about, where you can get a longer barrel and you can get a bigger caliber, and it's going to function really well because Ruger makes pretty good rifles. The benefit to this is also that the Ruger American is pretty cheap. We're talking about 450 to about 550-ish dollars, depending on which caliber you get and how long a barrel you get. Okay, so now that we're talking about long-range firearms, I think the next obvious choice to talk about would be an AR-10. An AR-10 is going to be a little more expensive, but it comes with the added benefit of being the manual of arms that your AR-15 has if you followed my initial video recommendation. So you own your AR-15 already, now you're kind of used to those controls. Well, the AR-10 functions off the exact same control scheme, so you won't have any trouble learning how to use it. You might even be able to, swap your optic from your 15 to your 10 because it runs off the same Picatinny rail system on top. And if your optic is rated from 5.56 up to say 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor or whatever caliber you end up going with, that's possible to do. So the AR-10 comes in multiple calibers, like I was just saying. It's got a large magazine well, and you have to pick which caliber you want and then match your upper to the caliber that you choose. So you can't just swap calibers. Your barrel has to fit the round that you choose. So when you buy it, you need to think carefully about what you actually want. So I went with a 308. I think 308 is a really good caliber. I highly recommend that if you are going to get a AR-10, that you think about an 18 or 20-inch barrel, maybe even a 22-inch barrel, so you can shoot out to those farther distances. And I also recommend a bipod because these things are heavy. They're ridiculous. You're not going to want to take these to the range and shoot them standing, not because of the recoil, but because your forearm on your left hand is going to start hurting just trying to hold the barrel up at some point. Okay, so $800 to $1,000 can build you a pretty decent AR-10. You can build your own, just know that they are not like AR-15s, and mil-spec isn't really a thing with AR-10s. You have to figure out which companies manufactured which parts and figure out if they go together, okay? So now we're going to jump down to some AR-15 stuff. You already own your first AR-15. I recommended a 16-inch barrel. So now we're talking about how do you decide whether or not you want a shorter than 16-inch barrel. And the first thing you can do is you can build an AR-15 pistol. So AR-15 pistols have shorter barrels and they don't have a buttstock attachment. So they usually have what's called a pistol brace on there. If you are going to go this route, the ATF has finally stopped pushing the pistol brace rule that they came up with, and pistol braces are now allowed on your firearms, so you can do this. If you are going to do a shorter than 16-inch barrel, I highly suggest stopping at about 10.5 inches. Anything shorter than that, you're going to get way less accuracy. And when you get to this short, you're not really going for long range, but even at close range, your accuracy is going to be a little diminished past 10.5 inches. So this is a really good option. It's going to be easy to do. You could do it today with almost no fuss or hassle. But then I also recommend spending about as much as you spent on your other AR-15, so like the $500 to $700 range. But if you are going to go this route and you want to spend a little more, maybe get into the world of SBRs, the next option would be an SBR AR-15. So the SBR AR-15 allows you to put a buttstock on the end of your gun. So as you can see here, there's a pistol brace right here, and there's a buttstock right here. These might as well, for all purposes, be the same length. They're both shorter than 16 inches, so they both fall into the short barrel firearm category. One's a pistol because it doesn't have a buttstock, and the other's a rifle because it does. Now, how do we do this? We pay the ATF a tax stamp of $200 currently, as of recording date. And then you fill out a background check with the ATF, and they decide whether or not you can have one. And then they issue you a tax stamp, which allows you to then put this wonderful piece of plastic on the back of your device, and you now have an SBR and have to follow all SBR laws and regulations for the state that you're in, and whether or not you transport it over state lines has some ramifications as well. Okay, as of 2026, the tax stamp should drop down to $0. As far as I know, time of recording, that will be the case. All right, so we're going to jump over just to some pistols here. I have a Ruger Mark IV. The Ruger Mark IV, very much like the Ruger 1022, is a 22 long rifle pistol, and it's going to be really good for the same reasons that the Ruger 1022 is, which is you'll be able to shoot it really cheap. It's going to function. Ruger makes probably one of the best 22 long rifle handguns out there, the Mark IV. They make the Mark IV Lite, which I believe this one actually is a Mark IV Lite. And that's going to come with a tack rail, a pick rail for an optic, threaded barrel, but it'll be a really nice gun to shoot. And they come in about $400 to $500 depending on where you find them and what features you get. Okay, pretty basic gun. We're going to jump down to kind of the 1911 game. So I've got a few guns here that I'm going to talk about. First is going to be the Rock Island 1911. The reason why I have Rock Island 1911 on the list is because it's pretty cheap. The Rock Island comes in at about $350 to $450 depending on which variation of 1911 you get. The reason why I recommend a cheap 1911 is because 1911s skyrocket into insane prices based on manufacturer, quality, and custom time spent hand crafting the firearm. And these can get to wild prices. Like you can look up videos online of like $50,000 1911s. They're crazy. But I do recommend that you either go kind of dirt cheap on these things and get something that's quality like a Rock Island dirt cheap versus something like a T-Sauce, which might not necessarily be as functional as a Rock Island. Or you should go wildly expensive. And I'm not talking $50,000. I'm not here trying to convince people to spend a fortune, but Wilson Combat 1911, $3,000 range, I think that's a good recommendation. If you're going to spend money on a 1911 and you want to spend more than just the small amounts of money that you can get into, then you should start thinking about why am I wanting to get into the 1911 game anyways, and that would be really, really good trigger, proven manual of arms that's been around forever, very high functioning, high speed gun for the money, okay? And Wilson Combat fits and checks all of the lists. It's a beautiful gun. People give it a lot of flack because you're spending so much money on it that you're afraid to holster it because you might scratch the finish, and it's because it does look really nice. You will notice that the differences between the Rock Island is one, this looks pretty basic. This is pretty nice looking. Trigger, obviously, this trigger is going to be better than this trigger, but this trigger is going to be better than most polymer striker fired handguns on the market. So even though this isn't top quality dollar, you're still getting a really nice firearm because it's going to beat out some of those polymer guns. Um, there's no optics plate on this and no tack rail. And as you can see, there's a tack rail on this and it's definitely optics cut. So you can put all the accessories on this that you want. It'll be a great firearm for about $3,000. I don't own one. If I was getting into the 1911 handgun market, I would probably go the Rock Island. I would just want it for the nostalgia factor of having a 1911. I wouldn't really want to spend a lot of money on that. All right, so we've talked about 1911s. The next gun that I would kind of recommend is a 2011. So I own a Springfield Prodigy. I paid about $1,300 for it. I regret that. I think I should have saved the extra money and gone with the Staccato P or some other variation of the Staccato. Staccato Ps run about $2,400 to $3,000, and they're great firearms. The Staccato guys all day at the range will talk about how great Staccato is. They'll never stop talking about it. They love them to death, but there's a reason for that. They're really nice guns. They are probably the gold standard for 1911s for that price range. Um, there's a lot of other companies that are starting to get into the 2011 game. 2011s, as far as I know, are a trademarked name for Staccato. And so when other companies start making firearms similar to these, they call them double stack 1911s or 9mm DSs, something along that line. But I do wish I had got a Staccato rather than my Prodigy. So that's enough about that one. We'll jump to the next one. So now we're out of the 2011, 1911 market, we're into revolvers. So this is more the case of like if you like the idea of a wheel gun and you kind of want to feel like a cowboy when you're shooting, or maybe you just like the reliability of these things. I highly recommend Smith & Wesson 686. It is not the firearm that I ended up going with when I got into revolvers, but I looked into it a lot. They're a lot cheaper. They are one of the highest recommended revolvers for competition shooters that get into revolver shooting. So I think that's a really good option. They are super cool because the plunger that pops the cylinder out to reload a Smith & Wesson is a push plunger instead of a pull plunger. So the next firearm I'm recommending is a pull plunger. It's a little harder to learn to use. Smith & Wesson 686 comes in at about $900. All right, next gun is the Colt Python. This is the firearm that I bought when I got into revolvers. I think it's a great option. They're classic, they're streamlined, they look super pretty, and they shoot well. So you can't really go wrong with a Colt Python. You can get a 3-inch, a 5-inch, a 6-inch. You can modify the barrel out, and every barrel comes with that nice rib on top, which makes it look like thicker and bulkier and more durable. But like I said, the plunger is a pull plunger, so when you pop the cylinder out, you have that weird manual of arms where you're pulling back on it instead of pushing forward. So if you're used to shooting polymer pistols with a push button magazine release, it might be a little harder for you to learn to pull your thumb back to get that trigger, and hook your thumb around it is a little more difficult. Colt Python comes in at about $1,300. Okay, so the last category is a little more simple. I only have one thing in here, so I have the pump action and semi-auto. And you'll notice I didn't name them in this video. In the last video, I put the Remington and the Mossberg for pump actions, and the Beretta 1301 and the Benelli M4 for the semi-autos. And so I think that if you really are getting into the shotgun world and that's the kind of the direction that you're going to round out your collection, then you either really liked the shotgun out of the first three guns and you only see yourself kind of shooting shotguns from this point on, so you should probably just buy the other iteration of shotgun that you didn't get. So if you bought, say, the Mossberg 590, maybe you want to get a Beretta 1301 or a Benelli M4 to round out your collection into the semi-auto world. And again, if you spent a lot of money and you went with the Benelli or the Beretta, maybe you jump back into the pump action world, because just because you have a faster firing shotgun doesn't mean that having that pump action necessarily is obsolete. So I think it's good to have both, especially if you really enjoy shooting shotguns. And obviously they make the aftershock versions, the small any other weapon shotguns that are pistol grip held. They're pretty neat. I could do an entire video about those themselves, but just remember, what we're doing here is we're trying to round out our collection. So these are kind of the firearms that I recommend. They're not the only firearms. Obviously, as you start rounding out your collection, you'll want to start diving into like historical firearms, or maybe like guns that you've seen in Hollywood movies where your favorite characters have used them, or maybe just kind of unique firearms that aren't seen very much in the shooting world. So I'll make a video on that later, kind of the more exotic world of firearms collection. And there's even like speculative investment firearms that you can get into. And I think a lot of people do that nowadays because they know that certain firearms do go up in price. And so there's actually a world in which you can buy all these guns, shoot them, and have fun with them, and years later sell them for a lot more and make a lot of money. I think that's kind of like gambling, but it's definitely something you could do. And if you know enough about the gun world, it's possible. So if you have any questions, drop a comment. I will respond. And thanks for watching, guys.